I learned a few years ago, to my amazement, that when young composers submit pieces in composition, music composers submit pieces to be judged for prizes. Typically, it's changing now, alas. Typically, instead of submitting, say, a tape or a CD, they submit the score. And the judges silently read the scores and judge first place, second place, third place on the basis of their silent reading of the scores. And I thought, boy, I can read music, but I can't do that. And I marveled at the capacity of composers being able to read scores at that level of acuity and to capture what was going on in the music well enough to make confident and agreed upon judgments. Now, I quite agree with you that faith can be a matter of a life lived. I do not agree with you that we can't study that in the same way that composers can study scores. You don't have to hear the music to judge it.
You can study it. I'm saying, can you test it in the way that you were describing it in an examination? Alister, were you wanting to...
Well, I was just intrigued by this. First of all, I thought it was a very good question. I'm very interested indeed by your answer. But again, if I can just go back to something I noticed when I was younger. I mean, when I was an atheist, I was looking at Christianity from the outside. And I saw people not doing certain things, which I thought actually might be quite interesting, and being forced to do things which seemed to me deadly dull. And I couldn't see for the life of me why they were doing that. And I think it's only later I discovered a kind of animating factor or sort of inner propensity which drove them to do that. And so in terms of watching something from outside, it's like watching a play. You see people moving, but you don't get the plot. It is a very complex thing. I think you're right to say one must be able to judge, must be able to analyze, but there's always the risk that there's a lack of sort of intellectual empathy, if you like, with what might be going on beneath the surface.
That's true, that's a risk, but there's also a risk, especially if you're inside, of overlooking the other explanation, which might be that, first of all, I would submit that just as when you speak your language, you don't know how you make up sentences, you have no inkling as to how you parse sentences, how you know which sentences are grammatical and which not. If you want to study that, you study it with linguistics. And it might also be true that the very behaviors that you are marveling at from the inside have an explanation that's completely alien to you, which you dislike intensely, and yet it is true. That is one of the things that science can do.
I think we've got time for another round of questions before the speakers sum up. There was a gentleman right at the back that I did indicate towards. Where's he gone?
I'd like to turn this...
hang on 1 second, and then there was somebody in the middle, and then somebody down here at the front afterwards.
Could we perhaps turn the house lights up?
Yeah, can you turn the house lights up? Is there anybody around who can hear me? No. Sorry, Dan.
I'd like to ask the same question, but turn it on its head. Can a scientist ever be outside the experiment or outside the sphere of observation? In other words, is there such a thing as this kind of true impartial observer that sort of like, archetypical positivist scientist? And if so, how would that scientist, what would that scientist look like?
Mm-hmm. Question over there.
This is a question to Professor McGrath. Do you find it significant that the word religion is hardly ever used in the New Testament? I think it's only ever used either of the what you might loosely call the pagan religions, or in the letter of James, I think it's used of what is essentially a first-generation Christian Judaism. But you wouldn't find it, for example, in St. Paul's writings, I think, and I don't think you'd find it in the Gospels. Now, do you think that has any significance? And if so, in relation to this discussion, what is that significance?
There's a gentleman here at the front. If you could pass the mic over, please. Thanks. And if the mic can get down here, there was somebody here. You could put your hand up so the mic person can see you. And please, put your hand up if you have any other questions. I'm keen to get as many as possible.
On the assumption that there is one eternal God, just one, there forever. It does puzzle me, and I'm just wondering what the two panelists think. Why has one God brought different religions, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the different sects within all these religions? Why has he confused all of us by bringing these different religions, and yet there's one eternal God?
Great.
I find it very puzzling.
Good question. Someone over here.
You're using the idea of memes to undermine religion, but in doing so, aren't you also undermining your own ideas? If memes are ideas for themselves, then they're not about truth. If they're about themselves, then they're not about truth.
Question here.
I just wanted to raise the question of faith. I wondered whether, and I suppose it's addressed to Professor Dennett, whether we aren't talking of a completely different phenomenon. You mentioned the fact that many religions ask us to submit to God. That, of course, is very similar to the marriage ritual as traditionally conceived. You promise to love, honour and obey. In other words, you submit to another person. And this is regarded as a kind of existential change. You're not now the same person after that commitment as you were before. And most religions also think that faith is like that. That there is an existential change. You're a different kind of person. This isn't a meme in this. I mean, you seem to think that all ideas are memes, but it's not like suddenly grasping Gödel's theorem, or coming to understand at last, the Wagner operas. This is a transformation of the personality, and that suggests that there's something more to this phenomenon than just the action of a meme on the intellect.
Any other comments or questions? No. Great. I'm wondering who wants the last word.
Well,
all right, Dan.
I'm ready to go. Let me take those questions in turn. Can a scientist get outside of science, was the first question. And the answer is, in a certain sense, is no, but science has dealt with that. We know that individual scientists are biased and hopeful, and that they can't be trusted to be objective, and that's why science has all of these built-in systems to protect scientists from their own subjectivity. That's why we do double-blind experiments. That's why we have peer review. Scientists are just as fallible as anybody else, and they can get their heads in awful twists because they are so eager to have their hypotheses proven. That's why they have devised all these impersonal methods for protecting them from their own credulity. And it's interesting that religion doesn't have anything that's remotely like that. Now, on the question of faith, several people. Oh, you want to just come back?
I'll come back. I think come back at the end.
I'll come back.
Right. One of the interesting things about the concept of faith, or I will say the meme of faith, is that it absolutely doesn't exist in any folk religion. It is people who are engaged in folk religions don't even realize they're engaging in a religion. They don't have a concept of religion. They don't think of it as a religion. It's just part of what everybody knows in the local group. It's completely continuous with their folk science, just the lore that everybody knows. The very idea of faith is a late development in the evolution of religion that's only found in some religions, and it is a particularly adaptive meme of the Abrahamic religions, and that's an interesting fact about it. Now, as to the question of how would on the assumption there's one God, why did that God permit all these different religions to flourish? Well, I guess it was a test of faith, wasn't it?